The cargo ship Defiant Dawn moved slowly through space like a tired old whale swimming through dark water. Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair, watching the stars drift past on the main screen. The ship was 3 days into what should be a simple run to New Ganymede Colony. Nothing special about it, just another boring supply run. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beep from the navigation computer. Chen took a sip of her coffee and made a face. The synthesizer was acting up again, making everything taste like burnt plastic. "Captain, we're right on schedule," said Navigator Rodriguez from his station. "Should reach New Ganymede in about 18 hours. Chen nodded. "Good. The sooner we drop off this medical equipment, the sooner we can get back to civilization and real coffee." Behind her, Communications Officer Willis laughed. "Come on, Captain. The frontier isn't that bad. Remember when we went to Kepler Station? They had that amazing pie." "One good pie doesn't make up for 3 months of synthetic food," Chen replied. She stood up and stretched, her joints popping after sitting too long. At 42, she was starting to feel every year of her 20-year career in space. The Defiant Dawn wasn't much to look at. The ship was old, bought second-hand from a mining company that went bankrupt. The hull was patched in several places and the paint job was fading. But she was solid and reliable. Chen had spent 5 years as her captain, hauling cargo from the inner worlds to the frontier colonies. The crew was small but good, 12 people total, including herself. Most of them had been with her for years. They weren't military, just regular folks trying to make a living in space. Rodriguez had been a taxi pilot on Mars before joining the crew. Willis used to work for a communications company. Engineer Martinez had fixed everything from air recyclers to hyperdrive engines for 15 years. Dr. Patel was technically passengers on this run, heading to New Ganymede to help set up their new medical facility. But she had been helping around the ship, fixing small injuries and checking on the crew's health. She seemed nice enough, though Chen noticed she asked a lot of questions about the ship's systems. The rest of the crew was scattered around the ship, doing their usual jobs. Cook Thompson was probably in the galley, trying to make something edible from their supplies. The maintenance team was checking systems and fixing the small problems that always came up on old ships. Chen walked over to the tactical station, where Security Chief Barnes was reading something on his tablet. Barnes was new to the crew, hired just before this run. His credentials were good and he seemed to know his job, but there was something about him that made Chen think he had more experience than his file showed. "Anything interesting on the sensors?" she asked. Barnes looked up from his tablet. "All quiet, Captain. A few commercial ships on the shipping lanes, but nothing unusual. The Border Patrol hasn't reported any pirate activity in this sector for months." Chen nodded. This part of space was supposed to be safe. They were in the neutral zone between human space and the territory claimed by the Cathamari, a species that humans had been trading with for about 10 years. The Cathamari weren't exactly friends, but they weren't enemies either. They kept to their side of the border and humans kept to theirs. The door to the bridge opened and Engineer Martinez came in carrying a toolkit. "Captain, I've been checking the cargo bay sensors like you asked. Everything looks normal. The medical equipment is secure and running fine." "Good," Chen said. "How's our passenger doing?" "Dr. Patel? She's fine. Spent most of the day in the cargo bay, checking on the medical supplies. Says she wants to make sure everything's working properly when we reach New Ganymede." Chen found that a little odd. Most passengers tried to stay out of the way, not spend time in the cargo areas. But doctors were particular about their equipment, so maybe it made sense. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, "I'm picking up some strange readings on the long-range sensors." Chen moved back to the navigation station. "What kind of readings?" Rodriguez frowned at his screen. "Not sure. Could be ships, but they're too far away to tell for certain, and they're not broadcasting identification signals." "Could be pirates," Barnes said, suddenly more alert. "This sector's been quiet, but that doesn't mean it's empty." Chen thought about it. Pirates weren't unknown in this area, but they usually went after ships carrying valuable cargo. Medical supplies weren't worth much on the black market. Still, better to be safe. "How long until they're close enough to identify?" she asked. "Maybe 2 hours," Rodriguez said. "If they keep coming this way." "All right, everyone stay alert. Willis, try to contact them on standard frequencies. Maybe they're just traders who forgot to turn on their transponders." Willis worked at his console for several minutes, sending out standard greeting messages on all the common channels. Nothing came back. "No response, Captain," he reported. "Either they can't hear us or they don't want to talk." Chen felt a familiar tightness in her stomach. After 20 years in space, she had learned to trust her instincts. And right now her instincts were telling her something wasn't right. "Barnes, what kind of defensive systems do we have?" she asked. Barnes consulted his tablet. "Standard civilian stuff. Basic shields, a couple of point defense lasers for shooting down debris. Nothing that would stop a real attack?" "I see." Chen made a decision. "Rodriguez, plot a course change. Take us toward the nearest shipping lane. If these are pirates, they might think twice about attacking us if there are other ships around." "Yes, Captain." As Rodriguez worked on the navigation computer, Chen activated the ship's intercom. "Attention all crew. This is the captain. We may have some unidentified ships approaching our position. This is probably nothing to worry about, but I want everyone to stay alert and be ready to secure your stations if needed." She turned off the intercom and looked around the bridge. Her crew looked nervous but ready. They had been through rough weather before, literally and figuratively. The Defiant Dawn might not look like much, but Chen was proud of her ship and her people. The next hour passed slowly. The unknown ships kept getting closer, and it became clear they were heading directly for the Defiant Dawn. Willis kept trying to contact them, but got no response. "Captain," Rodriguez said quietly, "I count 3 ships. They're definitely military grade based on their engine signatures." "Kethmari?" Chen asked. "I think so. The sensor profiles match what we have in our database." Chen frowned. What were Kethmari warships doing in the neutral zone? And why weren't they responding to communications? "Captain," Barnes said, his voice tight. "They just powered up their weapons." The bridge went dead quiet. Chen felt her heart start beating faster. This was no chance encounter. The ships had been hunting them. "All stop," she ordered. "Willis, broadcast on all frequencies that we are a civilian vessel carrying medical supplies. Tell them we are not armed and pose no threat." "Broadcasting now, Captain." But even as she gave the orders, Chen knew it was too late. The unknown ships had found them in the middle of nowhere, had been tracking them for hours without responding to communications, and now they were powering weapons. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an attack. The Defiant Dawn hung in space, looking like exactly what she appeared to be. An old, defenseless cargo ship full of medical supplies and harmless civilians. As the 3 Kethmari warships closed in, Chen couldn't help but smile grimly. If these aliens thought they were getting easy prey, they were about to learn something very important about humans. Sometimes things weren't quite what they seemed. The 3 Kethmari warships dropped out of hyperspace like hunting sharks smelling blood in the water. They were sleek and deadly, their dark hulls covered with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Each ship was twice the size of the Defiant Dawn, and packed with enough firepower to turn a small moon into dust. Warlord Thexan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blood Talon, watching the human cargo ship through the main view screen. The humans had stopped moving and were broadcasting surrender messages. "Just as expected?" "Pathetic," Thexan growled, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "Look how quickly they give up. No wonder these mammals are so easy to conquer." His second-in-command, Commander Vexai, checked his tactical display. "The human ship shows no weapon signatures, Warlord. Their shields are minimal. They appear to be exactly what they claim, a simple cargo vessel." Thexan nodded. The Kethmari had been watching human shipping for months, studying their routes and defenses. Most human ships were poorly protected, relying on treaties and trade agreements instead of proper weapons. It made them perfect targets for raids. The Kethmari Empire was expanding and they needed resources. Human cargo ships carried valuable supplies to their frontier colonies. Taking a few ships here and there would hardly be noticed by human authorities, and if the humans complained, well, space was dangerous. Pirates were everywhere. "Open a channel to the human ship," Thexan ordered. On the view screen, the face of a human female appeared. She looked middle-aged with short dark hair and tired eyes. Completely unremarkable. Just another weak human trying to make a living in space. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the cargo vessel Defiant Dawn," the human said. "We are carrying medical supplies to New Ganymede Colony. We are not armed and pose no threat to your ships." Thexan stepped forward, making sure the human could see his full size. At nearly 8 feet tall, with armored skin and razor-sharp teeth, Kethmari were designed to be intimidating. Most species surrendered just from looking at them. Human vessel, he said in accented English. "You are now prisoners of the Kethmari Empire. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your ship." The human captain's face went pale. "Boarded? But we're in neutral space. This is a violation of the peace treaty." "Treaties are for equals," Thexan replied. "You will surrender your cargo and crew immediately. Comply, and you may live long enough to work in our labor camps." He could see the fear in the human's eyes. "Good. Fear made them easier to control." I understand," Captain Chen said. "We're powering down our engines and defensive systems. Please don't hurt my crew." The transmission ended. Thexan turned to his crew, all of them seasoned warriors who had raided dozens of ships over the years. "Prepare boarding parties," he ordered. "I want 50 warriors ready to secure that ship. Remember, humans are weak, but they sometimes try to hide valuable items. Search everything." Within minutes, the Kethmari had surrounded the human ship. The Defiant Dawn hung motionless in space, looking helpless and defeated. Her engines were dark, her shields were down, and she was broadcasting continuous surrender signals. Commander Vexhai studied the sensor readings. "The ship appears to be exactly what it claims, Warlord. Cargo vessel, approximately 20 years old, minimal crew. I detect life signs for 12 humans aboard. Any weapons? None that I can detect. Their defensive systems are primitive at best." Thexan nodded. It was almost disappointing how easy this was. Human ships were like children's toys compared to Kethmari technology. Their sensors couldn't even detect weapons that were properly shielded. "Dock with their airlock," he ordered. "I'll lead the boarding party myself. It's been too long since I've seen human fear up close." The Blood Talon moved alongside the Defiant Dawn and extended its docking tube. Thexan could hear the mechanical sounds of the airlock engaging. In a few minutes, he would be aboard the human ship, claiming it for the Empire. He gathered his boarding party in the airlock bay, 50 of his best warriors, armed with plasma rifles and shock weapons, more than enough to handle a dozen terrified humans. "Remember," he told his troops, "humans are fragile. Don't kill them unless they resist. Dead slaves are worthless slaves." The warriors laughed, a sound like grinding metal. They had done this many times before. Human merchants, colonists, even military personnel, they all broke eventually. It was just a matter of applying the right pressure. The airlock cycled open and Thexan stepped aboard the human ship. The corridors were narrow and poorly lit, nothing like the grand passages of Kethmari vessels. Everything looked cheap and worn down. Typical human construction. His warriors spread out behind him, securing intersections and checking rooms. The ship's layout was standard for human cargo vessels. Living areas in the front, engineering in the back, cargo bays in the middle. "Warlord," one of his scouts reported through the communication system. "I've found the humans. They're gathered in what appears to be their main cargo bay. They seem to be waiting for us. Good. They're being smart. Perhaps this will go smoothly after all." Thexan made his way through the ship's corridors, noting how quiet everything was. No alarms, no sounds of humans running around in panic. They had accepted their fate quickly. Sometimes prey knew when it was beaten. The cargo bay was large, taking up most of the ship's central section. As Thexan entered, he saw the human crew standing in a group near some large containers. They all looked frightened, which was appropriate. Captain Chen stepped forward, her hands raised to show she wasn't armed. "Warlord, my crew and I are prepared to cooperate fully. Please don't hurt anyone." Thexan looked around the cargo bay. Dozens of sealed containers lined the walls, all marked with medical symbols, probably full of drugs and equipment that would be valuable on the black market. "Smart human," he said. "You understand your situation. Now you will tell me about your cargo and any valuable items on this ship." "Of course," Chen replied. "Everything is listed in our manifest. Medical supplies mostly. Some surgical equipment. Nothing particularly valuable to anyone except doctors." One of Thexan's warriors approached a large container and began examining it. "Warlord, these containers are sealed with advanced locks, much more sophisticated than usual for medical supplies. Interesting. Perhaps the humans were carrying something more valuable than they claimed. Weapons, perhaps, or rare metals disguised as medical equipment. Open them," Thexan ordered. "Right away, Warlord." As his warriors began working on the container locks, Thexan studied the human crew more carefully. They all looked like typical civilian merchants. Softweak probably never held a weapon in their lives. The captain seemed a bit more competent than the others, but still just a frightened human trying to protect her people. "Tell me, Captain," he said, How many ships like this does your government send to the frontier? I don't know, Chen replied. Many, I suppose. The colonies need supplies. And they're all as poorly defended as this one? Chen hesitated for just a moment before answering. Most cargo ships don't carry weapons. It's not cost-effective for civilian vessels. Thexan nodded. The human government was even more foolish than he had thought. Sending undefended ships through dangerous space was like serving dinner to predators. Warlord, the warrior working on the containers called out. I've opened the first one. Thexan moved closer to see what was inside. The container was full of what looked like medical equipment. Surgical tools, diagnostic machines, drug dispensers. Nothing obviously valuable, but as he looked closer, something seemed wrong. The equipment was too new, too advanced, and some of it didn't look quite right for a medical facility. What is this? He demanded, pointing at a device that looked like a scanner but had unusual markings. Captain Chen glanced at the device and shrugged. Portable medical scanner. For field diagnosis in remote areas. The warrior examining it frowned. Warlord, this device has military-grade encryption and hardened shielding, far beyond what civilian medical equipment would need. Thexan felt the first stirring of suspicion. Something wasn't right here. The humans were being too cooperative, too calm, and this equipment was more advanced than it should be. Open the other containers, he ordered. All of them! Now! As his warriors spread out to examine more of the cargo, Thexan looked at Captain Chen again. She still appeared calm and cooperative, but there was something in her eyes now. Something that hadn't been there before. For just a moment, she didn't look like prey anymore. She looked like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The moment Thexan's warriors opened the third container, everything changed. Hidden sensors throughout the Defiant Dawn detected the unauthorized access and sent signals racing through the ship's computer systems. What appeared to be a simple cargo monitoring network suddenly revealed itself as something far more sophisticated. In the engineering section, panels that had looked like standard maintenance access points slid open with mechanical precision. Behind them, weapon systems that had been completely invisible to Kethmari sensors began powering up. The ship's computer, which had appeared primitive and outdated, activated protocols that transformed the entire vessel. Captain Chen felt the subtle vibration through the deck plates as the ship's true systems came online. She had been waiting for this moment since the Kethmari boarded. The hardest part had been acting scared and helpless while alien warriors tramped through her ship. But the Defiant Dawn wasn't really a cargo vessel. She was a Q-ship, a military vessel designed to look like a helpless merchant. And Captain Chen wasn't really a civilian merchant captain. She was Commander Sarah Chen, Special Operations, Human Space Defense Force, and she was very good at her job. Warlord, one of the Kethmari warriors called out, his voice tight with confusion. This container doesn't contain medical equipment. It's full of military-grade combat gear. Thexan spun around to look, his mandibles clicking with alarm. Inside the container, instead of surgical tools, he could see assault rifles, body armor, and ammunition. Enough to equip a full military squad. What is this? He demanded, turning back to Captain Chen. Chen smiled, and for the first time since the boarding began, she looked completely calm. That, Warlord, would be our medical supplies. You lied to us. No, Chen replied. I told you we were carrying medical supplies to New Ganymede. I just didn't mention what kind of medical problems we were expecting to treat. Around the cargo bay, the other members of her crew were no longer cowering. Engineer Martinez stepped away from the wall, his hand moving to a concealed panel. Communications Officer Willis casually reached into his jacket. Even Dr. Patel, who really was a doctor, was standing differently now. The Kethmari warriors sensed the change in atmosphere and began raising their weapons. But they were too late. Martinez slapped his hand against the wall panel, and emergency lights throughout the cargo bay shifted from white to red. At the same time, hidden speakers crackled to life with a sound none of the aliens had ever heard before. It was a human war cry, recorded from battles fought on a dozen different worlds. It was the sound that human enemies learned to fear, the roar of a species that had clawed its way to the top of a death world's food chain through violence and determination. The Kethmari froze for just a moment, confused by the alien sound. That moment was all Chen's people needed. Martinez pulled a combat knife from his belt and buried it in the throat of the nearest warrior, before the alien could even react. Willis drew a plasma pistol and put 2 shots into another Kethmari's chest. Dr. Patel, who had spent 5 years as a combat medic before going to medical school, grabbed a surgical laser from one of the containers and began using it in ways it was never intended for. But the real surprise came from the ship itself. Hidden weapon ports opened throughout the vessel, revealing gun turrets that had been disguised as sensor arrays. The cargo containers that lined the corridors opened like flowers, exposing automated defense systems that began targeting any Kethmari life signs. In the engineering section, what the aliens had assumed was a standard cargo ship drive revealed its true nature. The Defiant Dawn's engines were military grade, capable of accelerations that would turn a normal freighter into scrap metal. Her power plant was designed to run weapon systems that could punch holes through battlecruiser armor. Thexan watched in horror as half his boarding party died in the first 30 seconds of combat. These weren't the weak, frightened humans he had expected. They moved like soldiers, fought like demons, and showed no mercy whatsoever. Impossible, he roared, firing his plasma rifle at Captain Chen. Chen dove behind a container as the shot scorched the air where she had been standing. Nothing impossible about it, Warlord, she called out. You just made some bad assumptions. She popped up from cover with an assault rifle in her hands and sent a burst of armor-piercing rounds in his direction. Thexan barely managed to dodge behind a support pillar. You see, Chen continued, her voice conversational even as gunfire erupted around them. The problem with your kind is that you think being physically strong makes you superior. But humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being the biggest or the strongest. She fired another burst, forcing Thexan to keep his head down. We became dominant by being smarter, by being more adaptable, and by being absolutely ruthless when we need to be. Around the cargo bay, the battle was going badly for the Kethmari. The humans fought with a coordination that spoke of extensive training and experience. They used the ship's layout to their advantage, setting up crossfires and ambushes that picked off the alien warriors one by one. But it was more than just tactics. The humans fought with an intensity that the Kethmari had never encountered. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to destroy their enemies completely. Engineer Martinez cornered 2 Kethmari warriors in a side corridor and smiled as he activated a plasma torch. You picked the wrong ship, boys, he said in accented English. The aliens didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. It was the sound of a predator about to feed. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Patel had turned her surgical equipment into weapons of war. She used a bone saw to cut through Kethmari armor like it was paper, then applied her medical knowledge to find the most efficient ways to disable alien anatomy. The irony, she said to a wounded Kethmari warrior, is that I really am a doctor. I know exactly where to cut to cause maximum damage without killing you immediately. The warrior tried to crawl away, but Patel followed with the patience of someone who had spent years studying anatomy. Meanwhile, Communications Officer Willis had taken control of the ship's internal communication system. He was broadcasting human military songs throughout the vessel, ancient war chants from Earth's bloodiest conflicts. The sounds echoed through the corridors like the hunting calls of apex predators. Back in the cargo bay, Thexan was down to less than a dozen warriors. The humans had them surrounded and were picking them off with methodical precision. This wasn't a battle anymore, it was an execution. How? He gasped, clutching a wound in his side. Your ship showed no weapons. Our sensors detected nothing. Captain Chen stepped out from behind her cover, her rifle trained on his chest. Human sensor technology is a bit more advanced than you realized. We've been scanning your ships for months, learning about your capabilities. Did you really think we'd send undefended vessels into space without knowing who might attack them? She smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Thexan had ever seen on any face. The Defiant Dawn isn't the only Q-ship patrolling these routes, Warlord. There are dozens of us, all disguised as helpless merchants, all waiting for someone to make the mistake you just made. The Kethmari warlord looked around at the carnage in the cargo bay. His elite warriors, troops who had conquered worlds and destroyed fleets, had been butchered by a handful of humans who had pretended to be frightened civilians. Your people will pay for this, he snarled. The Empire will send fleets to burn your worlds. Chen's smile never wavered. Good luck with that. You see, there's one more thing you don't understand about humans, Warlord. She raised her rifle and aimed at his head. We've been fighting wars since before your species discovered fire, and we've gotten very, very good at it. The last thing Thexan saw was the muzzle flash from Chen's weapon. Throughout the ship, the sounds of battle were dying down as the last Kethmari warriors were eliminated. But the Defiant Dawn wasn't finished yet. Her hidden weapon systems were already tracking the 3 warships waiting outside, calculating firing solutions and preparing to demonstrate what human military engineering could really accomplish. The aliens had expected to find easy prey. Instead, they had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. Commander Vexhai stood on the bridge of the Kethmari warship Crimson Blade, watching his tactical display with growing alarm. The life signs from the boarding party were disappearing one by one, winking out like candles being blown out by a strong wind. "What's happening over there?" he demanded. His tactical officer, a young warrior named Kresh, worked frantically at his console. "I don't know, Commander. First we lost contact with half the boarding party. Then their life signs started going dark. The last transmission was just screaming." Vexhai felt his skin crawl. 50 elite warriors didn't just disappear, not when fighting a handful of weak humans. There had to be an explanation. Are there other human ships in the area? Hidden reinforcements? No, sir. Sensors show no other vessels. Just the cargo ship. That made no sense. Vexhai had seen the scan results himself. The human ship was old, unarmed, and carried only a small civilian crew. How could they possibly have eliminated a full Kethmari boarding party? "Sir," Kresh called out urgently. "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the human ship. Power levels are increasing beyond anything their engines should be capable of." On the main view screen, the Defiant Dawn was beginning to change. Panels that had appeared to be simple hull plating were sliding apart, revealing weapon ports that definitely hadn't been there before. The ship's engine glow was shifting from the dim blue of a civilian drive to the bright white of military-grade reactors. "Impossible," Vexhai whispered. "That ship is a merchant vessel. Our intelligence confirmed it." But even as he said it, he knew he was wrong. The ship hanging in space before them was transforming from a harmless cargo hauler into something that looked very much like a warship. And the energy readings his sensors were picking up suggested it was armed with weapons that could threaten even Kethmari vessels. "Commander," Kresh said, his voice tight with fear, "they're targeting us." Before Vexhai could respond, the Defiant Dawn opened fire. The first volley caught the Crimson Blade completely off guard. Railgun rounds moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through the warship's shields like they weren't even there. The Kethmari had never encountered human magnetic acceleration technology before, and their defensive systems were completely unprepared for projectiles moving that fast. The bridge shook as the rounds tore through the ship's hull, ripping apart armor plating and internal systems. Vexhai was thrown from his command chair as the artificial gravity fluctuated. "Return fire," he screamed. But the Crimson Blade's weapon systems were already damaged. The human attack had been surgically precise, targeting the ship's most vulnerable points with an accuracy that suggested intimate knowledge of Kethmari technology. On the Defiant Dawn, Captain Chen watched the enemy warship reel from her attack and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Kethmari weren't the only ones who had been studying their enemies. Human intelligence had been analyzing captured Kethmari technology for years, looking for weaknesses. "Target their engine core," she ordered. "I want them disabled, not destroyed. We need survivors to spread the word." Engineer Martinez, now manning the weapons console with the skill of someone who had done this many times before, adjusted his targeting parameters. "Understood, Captain. Precision strike coming up." The second volley from the Defiant Dawn was even more devastating than the first. This time, the railgun rounds were followed by plasma torpedoes that had been disguised as cargo containers. The human ship had literally been carrying its ammunition as fake medical supplies. The Crimson Blade's engine section erupted in a series of explosions as the plasma torpedoes found their targets. The warship went dark, drifting helplessly in space as its power systems failed. But Chen wasn't finished with the Kethmari yet. The aliens had made a serious mistake when they decided to attack human shipping. It was time to teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. "Willis, open a channel to the other 2 ships," she ordered. The remaining Kethmari vessels, the Blood Talon and the Dark Star, were frantically trying to understand what had just happened. Their sensors showed impossible readings. The human cargo ship was somehow more powerful than their own warships. "This is Captain Chen of the Human Space Defense Force," she broadcast. "Your boarding party is dead. Your flagship is disabled. You have 2 choices. Surrender immediately or join your friends in whatever afterlife your people believe in. On the Blood Talon, which had been Warlord Thexan's flagship, the remaining crew struggled to comprehend their situation. Their leader was dead, their elite warriors were gone, and a ship they had thought was helpless prey had just crippled one of their warships. Subcommander Nextar, now the senior officer, stared at the tactical display in disbelief.
How is this possible?
Intelligence said human cargo ships were defenseless. His tactical officer was working frantically at his console. Sir, I'm running detailed scans of the human ship. It's not what we thought. The hull configuration, the power signatures, the weapon placements. This is a military vessel disguised as a merchant ship. Nextar felt a chill run through him. If the humans were sending disguised warships along their trade routes, how many other merchant vessels were actually armed and waiting? How many Kethmari raiding parties had attacked what they thought were easy targets, only to discover they were facing trained killers? Sir, his communications officer called out. The human is hailing us again. Chen's voice came through the speakers, calm and professional. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. If you choose to fight, I promise you won't live to regret it. Nextar looked around his bridge at his remaining crew. These were experienced warriors who had fought in dozens of battles. But there was something in the human's voice that made his skin crawl. It was the tone of someone who had killed before and would do it again without hesitation. What are your orders, sir? His tactical officer asked. Before Nextar could answer, the human ship demonstrated what would happen if they chose to resist. A single railgun round fired across the bow of the Blood Talon, missing by less than 100 meters. The projectile continued on into empty space, where it struck a piece of debris from the disabled Crimson Blade and vaporized it completely. The message was clear. The humans could have destroyed them just as easily. Sir, the tactical officer said quietly, our weapons are no match for theirs. Their shields are holding against our scans. Their weapons are more advanced than anything in our database, and they've already proven they can disable our ships. Nextar made the hardest decision of his military career. Power down all weapons. Signal surrender. On the Defiant Dawn, Chen received the surrender signal and nodded with satisfaction. This was how it was supposed to work. The Kethmari had learned that attacking human ships came with consequences, but she wasn't finished yet. The third ship, the Dark Star, was still trying to escape. Martinez, target their engines. Don't let them get away. With pleasure, Captain. The Dark Star had been attempting to charge its hyperdrive for a jump to safety, but human railgun technology was faster than Kethmari FTL charging sequences. The rounds caught the fleeing warship just as its drive was reaching critical power levels. The resulting explosion lit up space like a small star. When the glare faded, there was nothing left of the Dark Star but expanding clouds of ionized gas. Chen watched the destruction with no emotion at all. The Kethmari had chosen to run rather than surrender. In her experience, enemies who ran away today came back with friends tomorrow. Better to make sure they couldn't report what they had learned. Captain, Willis reported, I'm receiving distress signals from the Crimson Blade. They're requesting medical assistance. Denied, Chen replied. They started this fight. They can deal with the consequences. She turned to address her crew, all of whom had performed their roles perfectly. Good work, everyone. Martinez, prepare boarding teams to secure the surrendered vessel. I want their computers stripped and their crew interrogated. We need to know how much the Kethmari know about our shipping routes. Already on it, Captain, Martinez replied, though I suspect they're going to be a lot more careful about attacking human ships from now on. Chen smiled. That was exactly the point. The Q-ship program had been designed not just to protect human merchant vessels, but to send a message to anyone who might consider humans easy prey. The message was simple. Things weren't always what they seemed. And humans, when threatened, could be far more dangerous than anyone expected. As the Defiant Dawn's boarding teams prepared to secure their prisoner ship, Chen reflected on the battle they had just won. The Kethmari had made the same mistake that humans' enemies always made. They had underestimated what a supposedly peaceful species could do when pushed. It was a mistake they wouldn't make again. 6 hours after the battle, the Defiant Dawn had resumed its journey to New Ganymede, once again looking like nothing more than a tired old cargo ship hauling medical supplies. The weapon ports were sealed, the military-grade systems were powered down, and the hull showed no signs of the devastating firepower it had unleashed. Captain Chen sat in her ready room, filing her after-action report. To anyone monitoring standard communication channels, it would appear to be a routine incident report about pirates in the shipping lanes. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would attract attention. The truth was somewhat different. "Computer, begin encryption protocol 7 Alpha 7, she said to her. "Workstation. Encryption active," the computer replied in a voice that was now noticeably more sophisticated than it had been. During the Kethmari boarding, Chen began her real report. Operation Mousetrap Phase 1 complete. 3 Kethmari vessels neutralized, 1 destroyed, 1 disabled and abandoned, 1 captured with full crew complement. Boarding party eliminated with 0 human casualties. She paused, thinking about how to phrase the next part. Enemy appeared to have no knowledge of Q-ship operations or human military capabilities. They approached the engagement with confidence consistent with attacking civilian vessels. Recommend continuing current deception protocols. The captured Kethmari vessel, the Blood Talon, was now being towed behind the Defiant Dawn, using the same magnetic systems that powered her railguns. To external sensors, it would appear that the human ship was carrying extra cargo pods, a common sight among merchant vessels trying to maximize their profits. Sub-Commander. Nextar and his surviving crew were secured in the Defiant Dawn's hidden detention cells, spaces that had been disguised as storage compartments. The Kethmari still couldn't quite believe what had happened to them. Dr. Patel was tending to their injuries with the same professional competence she had shown while fighting them. The aliens found this deeply disturbing. The human who had used surgical equipment to kill their comrades was now carefully treating their wounds. "I don't understand," Nextar said as Patel worked on a plasma burn on his arm. "Your species claims to be peaceful traders, yet you fight like demons." Patel looked up from her work with mild surprise. "Who told you we were peaceful? Everyone knows this." "Humans are weak. You avoid conflict. You rely on treaties and diplomacy instead of strength." Patel laughed, a sound that made the alien's skin crawl. "Oh, you poor thing. You really believe that, didn't you?" She went back to treating his wound with gentle, precise movements. "Let me explain something about humans, Nextar. We aren't peaceful because we're weak. We're peaceful because we're terrifyingly good at violence." The Kethmari officer stared at her. "I don't understand." "Earth is a death world," Patel continued conversationally. "Do you know what that means? It means our planet tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators with teeth like swords, diseases that could wipe out entire populations." She finished treating his wound and moved to the next patient. "Most species that evolve on peaceful worlds develop cooperation as their primary survival trait. But Earth wasn't peaceful. So we developed something else." "What?" Nextar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "We became the thing that other things were afraid of." In her ready room, Captain Chen was reviewing the intelligence they had gathered from the captured Kethmari computers. The data was disturbing but not surprising. The aliens had been monitoring human shipping for months, identifying routes and schedules. They had detailed plans for raids on dozens of human colonies, confident that they could take whatever they wanted without serious resistance. What they hadn't known was that every human merchant ship carried hidden transmitters that reported their position to space, Defense Force monitoring stations. When ships went missing or sent distress signals, Q-ships like the Defiant Dawn were dispatched to investigate. The Kethmari had walked into a trap that had been years in the making. Chen's door chimed, and Engineer Martinez entered with a datapad. "Captain, we've finished downloading their navigation computers. You're going to want to see this." Chen looked at the information and felt her blood go cold. The Kethmari hadn't just been planning to raid a few cargo ships. They had been preparing for a full-scale invasion of human space, starting with the frontier colonies. "How many ships?" she asked. "At least 300 warships, ma'am. Maybe more." They were using these raids to gather intelligence for a major offensive. Chen set down the datapad and thought for a moment. The Kethmari Empire had made a serious miscalculation. They thought humans were weak, because human diplomats preferred negotiation to warfare. They had mistaken restraint for inability. It was time to correct that misunderstanding. "Martinez, prepare a message drone. Maximum encryption. Priority transmission to Fleet Command." "Yes, ma'am." The message Chen composed was short and to the point. The Kethmari were planning war. Human intelligence had been compromised. and it was time to activate protocols that had been in place since humanity first ventured into space. As the message drone launched toward the nearest relay station, Chen reflected on what would happen next. Within days, every Q-ship in human space would receive new orders. Merchant vessels that appeared harmless would begin carrying more than medical supplies, and the Kethmari Empire would discover something that humans had learned long ago. Sometimes the most dangerous predator was the one that didn't look dangerous at all. 2 days later, the Defiant Dawn arrived at New Ganymede right on schedule. To the colonial authorities, she appeared to be exactly what her manifest claimed, a cargo ship delivering medical equipment. Dr. Patel disembarked with her supplies, thanked Captain Chen for the pleasant journey, and disappeared into the colony's medical facility. She didn't mention that half the medical equipment she was delivering was actually military hardware disguised as surgical instruments. The captured Kethmari vessel was transferred to a supposedly civilian shipyard for salvage operations. In reality, it would be taken apart piece by human intelligence specialists who wanted to understand Kethmari technology better. The surviving alien crew members would be held in facilities that officially didn't exist, where they would be questioned by people who were very good at getting information from unwilling subjects. Sub-Commander Nexitar would spend the rest of his life in a comfortable but secure facility, writing reports about human military capabilities that no one would ever read. The Kethmari Empire would assume he was dead, along with the rest of Warlord Thexan's forces. As far as the galaxy knew, 3 Kethmari warships had simply vanished while on routine patrol. Pirates, probably. Space was dangerous. Captain Chen filed her final report as the Defiant Dawn prepared to depart for her next assignment. Another routine cargo run to another frontier world. Nothing special about it, just another boring supply mission. But hidden in her cargo holds were weapons that could level cities. Her crew were veterans of a dozen secret wars, and her computers contained targeting data for every Kethmari military installation within 50 light years. The next time someone decided that humans looked like easy prey, they would discover what Earth's children had learned during millions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill them every day. They would learn that the most successful predators were the ones that didn't look like predators at all. As the Defiant Dawn disappeared into hyperspace, she left behind no evidence of the battle that had taken place. No wreckage, no distress signals, no trace that 3 Kethmari warships had ever been in the area. Space was vast and empty. Things disappeared all the time, and sometimes, when the galaxy's predators went hunting for easy prey, they discovered that they had become the prey instead. The message was spreading quietly through the networks that connected species across the galaxy. Human ships were not what they seemed. Human crews were not defenseless merchants, and humans themselves were not the weak, peaceful creatures that everyone assumed them to be. It would take time for the word to spread. But eventually every pirate, every raider, every would-be conqueror would hear the same warning. Don't hunt humans. They bite back, and when they do, they don't leave survivors to warn others. The Defiant Dawn continued on her mission, looking for all the world like a harmless cargo ship carrying medical supplies to the frontier. But now she carried something else as well. She carried a message that would echo across the galaxy for years to come. Humans were not prey. They were predators who had learned to wear sheep's clothing, and that made them the most dangerous species in known space.